I never intended for everything to change that night. The smell of pine and smoke hung thick in the air as I moved silently through the moonlit clearing, inching closer to the gathering. My pale hair was tucked under a worn hood, hiding myself from the prying eyes of the pack. Autumn had quietly claimed the forest painting, the leaves in amber and crimson, while a chill of winter teased the air. The pack's autumn equinox celebration was in full swing, the firelight dancing in stone circles, casting long shadows across faces I had known all my life, but had never truly belonged among. I shouldn't have been there. This celebration was for the pack, for those born with wolf blood, those who could shift under the moon's gaze. Not for me. I was the human girl, taken in after the accident that killed my parents. Raised alongside wolves, but never one of them. Keeper of their archives, keeper of their secrets, but never truly part of the pack. My fingers tightened around the small silver pendant my mother had given me before she died, a crescent moon cradling a tiny star. "Remember who you are," she'd whispered as she pressed it into my hand. "The moon watches over all creatures, Allara, even those who cannot howl back." I wore it always hidden beneath my clothes, a talisman against loneliness. From my hidden spot behind an ancient oak, I watched them dance and laugh. Their movements were graceful even in human form. Alpha Soren stood tall at the center, his dark hair streaked with silver, his presence commanding even in the relaxed joy of the celebration. The council members were gathered nearby. Kaelin with her knowing eyes, Caden with his scarred hands, and Lyra, whose tracking skills were legendary. And beside Soren stood the empty chair, the Luna's seat carved from pale wood and etched with symbols of protection and fertility. It had remained empty since Alpha Soren's mate passed away 5 years ago. No one touched it. No one approached it. Pack law. Until me. I hadn't planned on joining the celebration. I only meant to watch for a moment before returning to my small cabin on the edge of pack territory. But then, Kira Soren's 16-year-old daughter spotted me. Her face lit up with the unrestrained joy of youth as she bounded over and grabbed my hands. "Zarya, you came." Her enthusiasm drew curious glances from the nearby pack members. Some smiled hesitantly. Others frowned in open disapproval. "I'm just passing through," I murmured, trying to untangle myself from her grip. "You're always hiding in that library. Tonight is for everyone who serves the pack." She insisted, pulling me toward the gathering. My feet stumbled over roots, and I tried to resist, careful not to offend her. As the Alpha's daughter, her goodwill was valuable protection. "Kira, I don't belong here," I whispered urgently. She rolled her eyes. "You've lived with us for 15 years. When will you stop saying that? When your people stop reminding me?" I thought but didn't say. The music shifted as we approached, drums and strings blending into haunting melodies that stirred something primal. Even in my human blood, conversations quieted. As pack members noticed my approach, their enhanced senses picking up my distinctly human scent. I felt their gazes like a physical weight pressing against my skin. "Father," Kira called, dragging me toward the Alpha. "Look who I found skulking around the forest instead of celebrating with us." Alpha Soren turned his steel-gray eyes, finding mine with unsettling precision. Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps, or curiosity. We rarely interacted directly. "Archivist," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Not a Luna." He added the words, almost a dismissal. "Alpha." I bowed my head respectfully, my heart hammering in my chest. 15 years of living among wolves had taught me the proper protocols, if nothing else. "Sit with us," Kira insisted, gesturing toward the circle of logs and chairs arranged near the fire. Elena just finished telling the old story of the first shift. Before I could protest, a commotion broke out on the far side of the clearing. Damon and Quill, 2 young males, were circling each other. Teeth bared in challenge, their eyes gleamed with the amber hue that preceded shifting. Excuse me, Soren said tersely, moving with fluid grace toward the disruption. In the momentary distraction, Kira was called away by her friends, leaving me awkwardly standing near the circle of seats. The night air pressed against my skin as conversations resumed around me, deliberately excluding me from their flow. I took a step backward, planning my escape. That's when I felt it. A strange pull like invisible threads tugging at my awareness. I turned slowly and found myself facing the Luna's chair. In the firelight, the pale wood seemed to shimmer with an inner light. The symbols carved into the Luna's chair seemed to flicker, shifting as though alive. I blinked, certain it was just the fire playing tricks on my eyes. I knew I should leave. The Luna's chair was sacred, meant only for the Alpha's mate, but something in the air, some pull I couldn't explain, whispered to me. I felt it in my bones. Just for a moment, I thought. Just to rest before I slip away. I sat down. The world stopped. The cold wood, which had initially pressed against me like a lifeless object, suddenly warmed beneath me. It molded itself to my form as though it had been crafted just for me. A soft, silvery glow emanated from the carved symbols on the chair's arms and back, illuminating my pale hands in the light. A quiet sigh escaped my lips, or maybe it came from the chair. It was hard to tell. I tried to stand, suddenly aware of what I'd done, but the chair held me in place. Not forcefully, but gently welcoming, claiming, "What have you done?" The voice came from Elder Kaelin, her ancient eyes wide with shock. She stood a few feet away, frozen in disbelief. Around the clearing, conversations faded, and all eyes turned toward me. Silence spread like ripples on a pond. And soon, every gaze in the gathering was locked on me, the human archivist, sitting in the Luna's chair, a seat that had remained empty for 5 years. Alpha Soren pushed through the crowd, his expression stormy. Behind him, Thorn and Quill, their earlier conflict forgotten, followed closely. The Alpha halted when he saw me, his face unreadable in the firelight. "Get up!" he ordered, his voice low and sharp. I tried again to rise, pressing my hands against the chair's arms, but I couldn't. "I can't," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. "It won't let me." Murmurs spread through the pack. Kaelin took a step forward, her gnarled hand reaching toward me. "The chair has not accepted anyone since Serena's passing," she said, her voice carrying the weight of old truths. "It cannot be forced or tricked. If it holds you—" She trailed off, unwilling to voice the unspoken implications. "This is absurd," Soren growled, his voice laced with disbelief. "She's human." "I'm sorry," I said, my voice small in the silence. "I didn't mean to." "Move aside," Soren ordered, and Nadia, the pack's legendary tracker, stepped forward. "This is clearly some mistake." She reached for my arm to pull me from the chair, but the moment her fingers brushed my skin, a pulse of energy surged from the chair. Nadia recoiled, stumbling into Caden, who steadied her with his words. "This is impossible," Soren insisted, his voice tinged with uncertainty. He stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the firelight. "Stand!" he commanded, his alpha voice carrying the weight of authority that no pack member could resist. The power in his words pressed against me like a physical force, but the chair's grip was stronger. "I would if I could," I replied, my voice trembling now. Around us, the pack had gathered closer, their expressions a mixture of outrage and curiosity. I caught sight of Nessa, her young face alight with something like hope. "The human has defiled our sacred traditions," Thorn spat, his handsome face twisted with disgust. Several others murmured their agreement. "Perhaps," Kaelin said slowly, her voice carrying the weight of history, "or perhaps the old magic has spoken." She turned to Soren. "Alpha, you know the legends. The chair chooses. It has always chosen." "Not a human," Soren snapped through clenched teeth. "Never a human." Yet as he spoke, the chair's glow intensified, bathing me in silver light that seemed to sink beneath my skin. The crescent moon pendant against my chest grew warm, Try to remove her, Soren ordered. Jensen, eager to prove himself, stepped forward. The young wolf grasped both my arms, pulling with his supernatural strength. Pain shot through my shoulders as he tried to lift me, but the chair rose with me, as if it were one with my body. Jensen released me abruptly, and I fell back into the chair with a gasp. The clearing fell into a deep silence, thicker than before. "What does this mean?" a voice whispered from the crowd. Kaelin's weathered face creased into a knowing smile, one that held secrets older than any present. "It means change is coming to the pack," she said softly. "The chair has chosen. I didn't ask for this." I said, my voice stronger than I'd expected. "I don't want it." Soren's eyes locked onto mine, searching for deceit, for manipulation. Anything that would explain what was happening. Finding none, his expression shifted, and he abruptly announced a council meeting. "Now, bring her," he ordered, as 4 pack members moved to lift the chair, with me still seated in it. But the moment their hands touched the wood, the same pulse of energy repelled them. "Can you walk with it?" Kaelin asked gently. I placed my palms on the arms of the chair and pushed. This time the chair allowed me to stand, though it felt as though it were still connected to me, like an extension of my body. When I took a step, it slid behind me as though weightless. "This way," Soren said tersely, turning toward the pack house at the northern edge of the clearing. As I followed him, the chair gliding eerily behind me, the pack parted. Their expressions had shifted. Fear and outrage had given way to confusion, and most disturbingly, a wary respect. Whispers followed us like leaves caught in the wind. "The chair has chosen. A human Luna impossible. The old magic has spoken." Everything was about to change. I clutched my mother's pendant beneath my shirt, its familiar weight offering some small comfort amidst the chaos I had unintentionally sparked. As we neared the pack house, a place I had never been allowed to enter, I caught a glimpse of myself in the window. The silver glow from the chair still clung to my skin, illuminating my pale hair and wide, uncertain eyes. For a moment, I didn't recognize the reflection staring back at me. I wasn't entirely human anymore, yet not wolf either. Something in between, something other. The council members followed us into the pack house, their faces grim. Nessa tried to step forward, but Soren stopped her with a sharp look. Before the door closed behind us, she caught my gaze and silently mouthed something. Was it a warning? Or a blessing? I couldn't tell. As the heavy oak door clicked shut, sealing me inside with the pack leaders and the mysterious chair that had chosen me, something shifted deep in my chest. It felt like a lock finally clicked into place, a final piece of something I couldn't yet comprehend. Everything was going to change tonight, including me. The scent of cedar and leather filled the air, mixing with an underlying sense of power that seemed to radiate from the walls themselves. The interior of the council chamber was ancient, the timbers worn smooth from centuries of use. Tapestries depicting pack history hung from the walls, wolves running beneath full moons, epic battles with rival packs and ceremonies I had only read about in the archives. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, its flames casting dancing shadows across the room. But even with the firelight, it was the eerie glow from the chair, and by extension from my skin, that filled the room with a strange, unsettling light. The council members took their places around the circular table, their movements stiff controlled. Kaelin took her seat opposite Soren, who remained standing, his imposing figure taut with barely contained emotion. Caden and Allara sat to his right, while 2 other council members I barely recognized filled the empty spaces on his left. I noticed the Luna seat behind me, the seat that had been vacant since Serena's death 5 years ago, and beside it, the seer's chair, also empty, untouched for decades. The Luna's chair, however, seemed to settle behind me as I stood awkwardly at the edge of the circle, unsure of my place in this forbidden space. No one offered me a seat. "This is unprecedented." Soren began, his voice carefully controlled, his gaze fixed on me. "In all our recorded history, the Luna's chair has never chosen someone without wolf blood. That's not entirely true, Kaelin countered, her ancient eyes never leaving me. There are legends from before the Great Division. Caden interrupted, his scarred hands tightening on the table. Legends, not history, not fact. Caden had always intimidated me. Nearly 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and the strength of a mountain, he radiated authority. Tonight, however, his anger seemed almost palpable, his presence even more imposing. The chair has chosen, Kaelin replied calmly, gesturing toward me. Can you deny what we all witnessed? It could be malfunction, Allara suggested, her sharp eyes narrowing in suspicion. The chair has been empty for 5 years. Maybe it's desperate, Caden spat, his words laced with disdain as his gaze flicked to me. I found my voice, though it trembled slightly in this room of predators. I never meant to sit there. I'll leave if you can just detach it. Soren's gaze snapped to me, his expression hardening. The chair doesn't detach. It chooses a Luna and bonds with her until death. His voice roughened on the last word, and I felt a sharp, sudden pain at the memory of his mate's death. A border skirmish that turned into bloodshed, a loss that had haunted him for years. I placed my hand over my mother's pendant, feeling its cool metal against my skin. Then what do we do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We find a way to undo this, Soren replied flatly. The pack cannot have a human Luna. He added, his words sharp, almost defiant. Cannot or will not. Elder Kaelin's voice was soft but firm as steel. Alpha, you know, as well as I do, that the old magic cannot be commanded. It can only be understood. If the chair has chosen Zarya, there must be a reason. The sound of my name in this sacred space made me flinch. It didn't feel right, too ordinary, too human for the weight of what was happening. What do you know about this girl? Allara demanded, her eyes narrowing as she leaned forward. Did you cast some spell? Use some human trickery? No, I replied quickly. I just sat down. I didn't know. Lies, Caden growled. No human accidentally sits in the Luna's chair during an equinox gathering. She planned this. Thorn added, his voice full of contempt. To what end? Kaelin challenged. To make herself a target for every wolf who believes humans have no place in the pack hierarchy. To bind herself to a chair that, by your own admission, cannot be separated from her until death. She turned to me, her gaze softening. Show them your mother's pendant, child. I froze, my hand trembling as it rested on the silver pendant beneath my shirt. How do you know about that? I asked, my voice barely audible. Kaelin smiled enigmatically. I am old enough to remember things others have forgotten. Please, she said, her voice soft but insistent. With shaking fingers, I pulled the pendant from beneath my collar, letting the crescent moon and star rest against my skin. The glow from the chair intensified, and I knew deep in my bones that everything had changed. In the flickering firelight, the pendant seemed to glow with the same silvery light as the chair. A collective gasp swept around the table. Soren took an involuntary step forward, his gaze fixed on the small silver pendant I held tightly. That's not possible, he whispered, his voice barely audible. What? I gripped the pendant defensively. It was my mother's. She gave it to me before she died, I said, unsure why it felt so important to explain. Your mother, Soren repeated, as if testing the words. The woman who died in the car accident at the edge of our territory 15 years ago. I nodded, confused by his sudden intensity. The pack had taken me in after finding me by the wreckage, the only survivor. I had always thought it was an act of mercy, driven by Serena, Soren's mate, who couldn't bear to see a child left orphaned. Her name was Claire. I offered, my voice uncertain. Claire Monroe. Elder Kaelin's weathered face cracked into a knowing smile. Monroe, of course. She turned to the council. The last seer of the northern packs was named Monroe Valeria Monroe. She disappeared 40 years ago. She continued, severing all ties with the wolf kind. My mother wasn't a seer, I protested. She was human, like me. Kaylin's gaze softened, but her words carried weight. The seer bloodline has always straddled the line between human and wolf. Not shifters, but not entirely human either. They carry the old magic in their veins, the ability to see beyond the physical world, to commune with the moon herself. The bloodline died out. Caden interrupted, his voice grim. Or it went into hiding, Kaylin countered. She gestured to the pendant. That is the symbol of the seer, the crescent that watches the star that guides. No ordinary jeweler crafted that pendant, child. It's an artifact of our kind, passed down through generations of Monroe seers. The pendant suddenly felt heavier, as if its true weight, the weight of its history, was settling upon me. But I can't see anything. I whispered, my voice small. I've never had visions, or whatever it is, that seers are supposed to have. The gift often awakens with trauma, Kaylin said gently. Or with a catalyst. Her eyes shifted meaningfully to the chair that still hovered near me, as though it had become a part of me, its strange magic somehow intertwined with mine. Soren had gone completely still, his gaze locked on me, unreadable. If what you're suggesting is true, he said finally, his voice tight, then Zarya is the rightful seer of the pack. Kaylin finished for him, her voice steady, and possibly more if the chair's choice is any indication. The weight of those words hung in the air, thick and suffocating, too heavy to ignore. If I was descended from seers, if my mother had been one, then my presence here among wolves wasn't just a twist of fate. It wasn't just the pack's mercy that had saved me from the foster system after my parents' deaths. I don't understand, I said, my voice trembling in the vast silence. If my mother was connected to the pack, why raise me as an outsider? Why keep this from me? Soren and Kaylin exchanged a look, one heavy with history. Politics, Lyra said bluntly, breaking the tension. The seer bloodline was controversial even before Valeria disappeared, she continued. Some believed they had too much influence over pack decisions. Others thought they should be eliminated entirely. A chilling thought, Caden added darkly. Are you saying my parents' accident wasn't an accident? Kaylin's voice softened as she finished. If Claire Monroe was indeed Valeria's daughter, and if she returned to the pack territories after all these years hiding her identity, there would have been those who saw her as a threat. Soren's jaw tightened. This is all speculation, he growled. We have no proof that Zarya's mother was connected to the seer bloodline beyond a pendant that could be mere coincidence. The chair, Kaylin reminded him softly. The Luna's chair has never chosen wrongly. If it recognized something in Zarya Seer's blood, perhaps, or some other quality needed by the pack, we must consider the possibility that this is no mistake. This is impossible, Soren insisted, but there was less certainty in his tone now. His gaze moved from my face to the pendant, to the glowing chair, and back to me. A human Luna. Not entirely human, Kaylin corrected gently, her voice calm but firm. Not if she carries the Monroe blood. The room fell silent, the only sound the crackling fire in the corner. Outside I could still hear the faint sounds of music and laughter from the celebration, the life that seemed so distant, like another world entirely. In here, history, fate, and magic were being rewritten around me, without my consent or understanding. What happens now? I asked, breaking the heavy silence that had fallen over us. Kaylin rose from her seat with surprising grace for her age. Now she said softly, we must consult the archives. If Zarya is indeed of the Monroe line, there may be records that could confirm it. The archives are my responsibility, I replied quietly, my hand still holding the pendant against my chest. I spoke without thinking, then flinched as every eye in the room turned toward me. I know every document in the collection. If there's anything about the Monroe Seers, I would have seen it. Not necessarily, Kaylin said with a cryptic smile. Some records are hidden from all eyes, save those meant to find them. The old magic protects its secrets, she added her words, carrying an unsettling weight. Soren straightened, a look of resolve crossing his face. We'll reconvene at dawn, he decided. Kaelin, take Zarya to the archives and see what we can uncover. The rest of you return to the celebration, but speak of this to no one. The council members rose, bowing their heads slightly to Soren before filing out. Only Caden lingered, his massive frame blocking the door as he spoke in a low voice to Soren. And if she is what the old woman claims, what then? Soren's steel-gray eyes found mine across the room. Then we face a choice no Alpha has faced. In 5 generations, he said, his tone heavy. The pack won't accept a human Luna. Caden pressed further, his tone sharp, no matter her bloodline. The pack will accept what I decide, Soren replied, his voice steady but filled with power, and I've made my decision. Caden bowed his head and left, leaving me alone with Soren and Kaelin. The Luna's chair still hovered near me, its soft glow lighting up the tension on Soren's face. Come, child, Kaelin said, her voice gentle but firm as she extended a gnarled hand. The past awaits us in the archives. I hesitated, glancing at Soren, and after we find what's there, what happens to me? Something shifted in his expression, not quite softening, but a subtle change in the hard lines around his eyes. That depends on what you discover. I never asked for this. I said, my voice quieter now, as if needing him to understand. I never wanted to disrupt the pack. We don't choose our blood, Soren said, his words laced with a resigned wisdom, or our fate. But we all must live with the consequences of both. With that, he strode past me, his footsteps echoing in the council chamber as he left. Kaelin watched him go, a knowing look in her ancient eyes. He fears change, she said softly, her gaze following Soren's retreating form. But the moon brings change whether we welcome it or not. Seasons turn, packs evolve. Power shifts, she added, turning back to me. And sometimes the least likely vessel carries the greatest hope. I'm not a vessel, I protested, my voice small. I'm just me. Oh, child, Kaelin's smile was full of secrets, the weight of centuries in it. You have never been just anything, not with that moon in your blood. She gestured toward the door, her hand steady. The archives await, and perhaps at long last, so do the answers. As I followed her out of the council chamber, the chair glided eerily behind me, its glow casting shadows on the walls. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a past I'd never known and toward a future I wasn't ready to face. The archives were different, at night transformed from the familiar sanctuary where I had spent countless hours into something ancient and watchful. The stone building sat at the edge of pack territory, housing centuries of pack history. Handwritten accounts, ritual objects, maps of lost territories, all meticulously preserved. For 15 years this had been my domain, my refuge from the pack's whispers and stares. Tonight, though, it felt like a stranger's home. Lanterns flickered to life as Kaelin moved through the narrow aisles with surprising familiarity. Her withered fingers trailed along the leather-bound spines of the old books. The Luna's chair followed me like a faithful shadow, its glow casting our movements in silver silhouettes against the stone walls. You've maintained the collection well, Kaelin remarked, breathing deeply, inhaling the scent of paper and leather that filled the air. Thank you, I replied, reaching for the catalog ledger on my desk. What exactly are we looking for? I asked, feeling a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. I've never found records specifically for Sears or the Monroe line. You wouldn't have, Kaelin answered. The most important secrets aren't kept in ledgers or labeled for casual discovery. She moved to the back wall where the oldest texts were stored in climate-controlled cabinets. Bring the chair closer, she said. I stepped forward and the chair slid silently behind me. Its silver glow intensified as we neared the ancient wall, illuminating hairline cracks in the stone I'd never noticed before. The light reveals what has been hidden, Kaelin murmured, pressing her palm against the wall, her eyes closing in concentration. Place your hand beside mine, child. Let the chair's magic flow through you. Hesitantly, I placed my hand against the cool stone. Immediately, warmth spread up my arm like liquid sunlight pooling beneath my skin. The cracks in the stone began to glow with the same silvery light as the chair, forming an intricate pattern, a crescent moon embracing a star. "The seer's mark," Kaelin whispered, her ancient voice full of reverence, exactly as Valeria said it would be. The stone beneath our hands shifted, grinding softly as a section of the wall receded, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. A musty scent of untouched air filled the space. This room had been sealed for decades. Inside, a simple wooden chest sat upon a stone pedestal. No lock, just a carving of the crescent and star symbol that matched my pendant. "Open it," Kaelin urged, her voice low with urgency. "It was meant for you." My heart raced in my chest as I stepped closer to the pedestal. The luna's chair hovered just behind me, its glow growing stronger until the small chamber was as bright as day. Trembling, I lifted the chest's lid. Inside, nestled on the bottom, was a leather-bound journal, its cover soft with age. Beside it, a silver circlet, set with moonstones, gleamed in the light. The craftsmanship was unmistakable. It matched my pendant perfectly. The circlet shimmered in the chair's light, the moonstones catching the glow and reflecting it back at me. "The seer's crown," Kaelin breathed, awe in her voice. "Not seen in 4 decades. Beneath the circlet lay a folded piece of paper, newer than the other items. With mounting anxiety, I unfolded it carefully. The elegant script inside read, "If you are reading this, then the time of hiding has ended and the chair has found you, as I always feared it might. I hope to spare you this burden, to give you a life untouched by pack politics and the weight of visions. Forgive me for my silence, for the truths I kept hidden even as I raised you among humans, far from your heritage. You are the last of the Monroe line, descended from the original seers who helped forge the pack alliances centuries ago. Our bloodline carries the old magic, the ability to see beyond the veil between worlds, to communicate with the moon herself, to glimpse what might be and what must never come to pass. This gift is both a blessing and a curse. It is why I fled the pack territories 40 years ago, why I changed my name from Valeria Monroe to Claire Wilson, why I married your father, a good man who knew what I was and loved me regardless. It is also why we returned when you were 5, though I knew the risk. Some visions cannot be ignored, no matter how desperately one wishes to. The accident that took us from you was no accident. There are those who fear the seer's power, who would extinguish our bloodline to ensure their own ambitions go unchallenged. I knew the risk in returning, but the vision was clear. You were needed here. The journal contains our family history and the techniques to control the visions that will come. Focus your abilities when the time is right. Trust Elder Kaelin if she still lives. Trust your instincts, and above all, trust the chair if it has chosen you. The Luna's chair was crafted by the first Monroe seer, imbued with magic that recognizes what must be, not merely what is. If it has accepted you, then you are exactly where fate demands, regardless of what others might believe. I am sorry for the burden this place is on your shoulders. Know that I loved you more than vision, duty, or pack. Remember who you are, Zaria Monroe. The moon watches over all her children, but some she entrusts with her secrets. Your mother, always Valeria Clare. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. The words confirmed what my heart had always suspected: I belonged nowhere. Caught between worlds, not fully human, not wolf, but something else entirely. The outsider status I'd always felt wasn't just pack prejudice. It was the price of a bloodline I never knew I carried. She knew, I whispered, looking up at Kaelin. She knew she might die by returning here, and yet she came anyway. Kaelin nodded gravely. Valeria's gift of foresight was the strongest I've ever witnessed. If she saw that you were needed here, then the vision, must have been compelling indeed. Needed for what? I asked, frustration creeping into my voice. To be treated as an outsider for 15 years, to accidentally sit in a chair that now won't let me go, to bring change when change is needed. Most. Kaylin's ancient eyes met mine with unwavering steadiness. The pack has grown rigid in its isolation, suspicious of the outside world. Soren leads with strength but lacks vision since Vesper's death. The territories face new threats, human development encroaching on our borders, rival packs forming alliances against us, hunters using technologies we barely understand. She gestured to the journal. Your mother saw something crucial in your future here, something worth dying for. I ran my fingers over the worn leather journal, feeling the imprint of my mother's hands on its cover. And if I don't want this responsibility, if I just want to go back to my cabin and live my normal life. Kaylin's laugh was gentle but without pity. Child, that option vanished the moment the chair chose you. There's no going back, only forward into whatever future awaits. I carefully placed the letter on top of the journal, then lifted both from the chest. The circlet I left untouched, unwilling to accept that symbol just yet. We should return, Kaylin said, glancing toward the archive entrance. Dawn approaches and the council will reconvene. As we emerged from the hidden chamber, the wall grinding closed behind us, I noticed a figure silhouetted in the doorway. Soren stood watching us, his powerful frame tense with unreadable emotion. You found something, he said, his tone not a question but a statement. I clutched the journal to my chest. My mother's words, I said quietly. Confirmation of what Kaylin suspected. Soren stepped into the archive, his movements fluid and predatory. And what did Valeria Monroe have to say to her daughter after all these years? There was something in his voice, curiosity but also something darker. You knew her. I whispered, hesitant but unable to stop myself from asking. I realized something suddenly. Before she left the pack, a muscle in Soren's jaw twitched. I knew Valeria, he said, his voice dropping slightly, as if the weight of the past was pressing down on him. Yes, everyone did, I said. She was the pack's seer during my father's time as Alpha. And when she returned, I pressed, sensing there was more to the story he wasn't telling. I had just mated with Vesper, he replied, his voice carefully controlled, and I was just starting my time as Alpha. Valeria came to the border with you and your father. She requested sanctuary, claiming she had vital information regarding threats to pack security. His eyes darkened at the memory. My father had been dead barely a month. The transition of power was contentious. He paused, his fingers tightening at his sides. Her arrival sparked rumors. Some believed she had returned to influence the succession. But you granted her request, I asked, needing to know more. Vesper insisted, he corrected. She believed Valeria's warnings about the threats gathering beyond our borders. I felt the air between us thicken. And you were less convinced, I asked, sensing the underlying tension. Soren's expression hardened as he looked away. The implication is heavy in the air, isn't it? I said, my heart pounding. Are you suggesting my mother's accident wasn't an accident? I'm suggesting nothing, he replied sharply, almost as if the words were forced out of him. Valeria and your father died when their car went off the mountain road during a storm. You survived. He took a deep breath before continuing. Vesper insisted we honor Valeria's bloodline by taking you in, despite the complications it presented. Complications, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. Is that what I've been all these years? I asked, my voice rising. A complication. Something flickered across his face, regret or perhaps memory. You were a child with dangerous heritage at a volatile time, he said, his words measured. The safest place for you was on the periphery of pack life. Safe for whom? I challenged, my newfound courage rising. For me or for your position as Alpha? Kaylin inhaled sharply at my boldness, but Soren didn't break his gaze. He didn't confirm nor deny my accusation. The council awaits, Soren said, his voice commanding. He turned toward the door and began walking, gesturing for me to follow. I stood still for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. The Luna's chair was still right behind me, following like a shadow, its glow intensifying as I walked. I reached the door, my hands trembling as I held on to the journal my mother left me. We passed through the pack territory where the last remnants of the celebration lingered. A few pack members cleaned up the mess from the feast, but as we passed, their eyes followed us, drawn to the eerie glow of the Luna's chair. The council chamber looked different in daylight, less mystical, more functional. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, casting beams across the dusty room. The council members were already seated, their faces drawn with exhaustion and the weight of the decision ahead. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, the chair gliding silently behind me. I placed my mother's journal and the letter on the table. The room grew quiet, all eyes on me. My mother was Valeria Monroe. I said, my voice stronger than I expected. The last seer of the northern packs. She hid among humans for decades before returning here when I was 5 years old. I touched my pendant, drawing strength from its familiar shape. She knew the risk of returning, but she did it because she foresaw that I would be needed here. Convenient prophecy. Caden scoffed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. She died for it. I shot back, my voice sharp. There's nothing convenient about that. Kaylin stepped forward, placing a gnarled hand on the journal. Valeria's gift was genuine, she said firmly. If she believed her daughter had a crucial role to play in the pack's future, we would be fools to dismiss it. Even if the girl is Monroe's daughter, Nadia interjected, her skepticism evident. It doesn't explain the chair's behavior. She has seer blood, perhaps, but the Luna's chair is meant for the alpha's mate, not a seer. All eyes turned to Soren, who stood with his back to the fireplace, his face unreadable. Kaylin's voice broke the heavy silence. The chair sees what we cannot. It sees the future, not just the present. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. That's absurd, Caden growled. The alpha cannot be matched to a human, even one with seer blood. The pack will never accept it, he added, his tone final. The chair has already accepted it, Kaylin countered, and the chair has never chosen wrongly in 3 centuries. I felt sick, caught in a whirlwind of politics and prophecy I never asked to be part of. I have no desire to be anyone's mate, I said firmly, especially not someone who's treated me as an unwelcome obligation for 15 years. Soren's eyes snapped to mine, storm gray and suddenly intense. You know nothing of obligation, girl. Soren's voice was low, dangerous as he fixed his gaze on me. Or of what I have or haven't done regarding your presence here. I stood my ground, anger giving me the courage to speak. I know I was kept at arm's length from pack life. I replied, my voice steady. Tolerated, but never welcomed. Is that how you treat someone you insisted on saving? A dangerous stillness settled over Soren's powerful frame, his jaw tightening. Serena had a tender heart. She believed your mother's warnings and insisted we honor her sacrifice by protecting you. But protection doesn't require integration. Some bloodlines are too volatile to risk exposing to pack life without proper preparation. He added, his words sharp as he avoided meeting my eyes. So you admit you feared what I might become? I pressed my voice hard with defiance. I exercised caution. He corrected, his tone clipped. A luxury I no longer have, it seems. He gestured to the glowing chair that still hovered near me. The old magic has forced our hand. Now we must decide how to proceed. The council's debate raged on for hours as the sun climbed higher, its light filtering through the windows, in a quiet reminder that time was running out. Proposals were made, only to be swiftly rejected. Ancient laws were cited and contested. Through it all, I sat silently with my mother's journal resting in my lap, the Luna's chair a constant presence at my side, its glow fading to a subtle shimmer in the daylight. The solution is simple. Caden's voice broke through the tension, his massive fists clenched on the table. We perform the rite of severance. It was used once before when a Luna was found. Unsuitable. His eyes flickered to me, full of barely disguised contempt. The woman died, he added, as if that settled everything. Kaylin shot him a sharp look. The chair's magic cannot be broken without consequence. Perhaps the consequences are worth facing, Nadia said, her tone cold and calculating. Her eyes sharp as a hawk's scanned the room. One life weighed against pack stability. "We are not sacrificing anyone," Soren growled, his voice heavy with authority. For the first time in nearly an hour, his words cut through the murmurs of the council. His presence was so commanding that the entire room fell silent. "The chair chose," he continued, his voice firm, as if this fact should end all debate. "We must deal with the reality before us." "And what reality is that exactly?" I finally found my voice challenging him head on. "Because from where I sit, or rather where this chair allows me to sit, it seems I've gone from tolerated outsider to either future Luna or sacrifice in a single night." I met his gaze unwavering. Neither option was ever mine to choose. Something in his expression shifted, though it didn't soften. There was a fractional easing of the hard lines around his eyes, the first sign of vulnerability I'd seen from him. "Few of us choose our fate, Zarya," he said, his voice low and almost regretful. "We merely navigate the currents we're given." The sound of my name on his lips made something tighten in my chest, a shiver running down my spine. It was the first time he had used it directly, without title, without distance. "Then let me navigate mine," I replied, lifting my chin, my resolve firming. "This is my heritage, my mother's legacy." I laid my hand gently on the journal. Let me study what she left behind. Perhaps there are answers here that could resolve this without drastic measures. Kaelin nodded approvingly, her gaze soft but wise. "Wisdom beyond your years. Valeria would be proud." Soren stood still for a long moment, his steely gray eyes locked with mine. Finally, he straightened, his decision made. "The council is adjourned until moonrise," he announced. "Zarya will have until then to search for alternatives in her mother's writings. And if she finds none," Caden pressed, his voice thick with impatience, "then we reconvene and make decisions based on pack law and necessity." Soren replied tersely, turning his eyes back to me. "You'll remain in the pack house until this is resolved. For your safety." I recognized the diplomatic phrasing for what it was, house arrest disguised as concern. "My cabin has everything I need for research," I said, standing my ground. "Your cabin is at the edge of pack territory," he countered, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Far from protection should anyone decide to resolve our dilemma independently." The warning was clear. It wasn't aimed at me, but at anyone who might consider taking matters into their own hands. I nodded slightly, recognizing the wisdom in his caution, if not the method of its delivery. The council members filed out, leaving me alone with Kaelin and Soren. "I'll show you to a room," Kaelin said, rising from her seat. "There's one in the east wing that should serve." But Soren shook his head, cutting her off. "The seer's quarters." Soren's voice was tight, his jaw clenching. "They've been empty since Valeria left, but they remain intact." A flicker of emotion passed over his face, something fleeting and unspoken. "It seems fitting given the circumstances." Kaelin's voice was heavy with the weight of the past. A shadow crossed her ancient face. "Are you certain those rooms have been sealed for decades?" "Open them," Soren commanded, though his voice betrayed a hint of hesitation, as if the words cost him more than he let on. He strode toward the door, but paused at the threshold, his eyes flicking to me. "Whatever answers you seek, Zarya, find them quickly. The pack grows restless with uncertainty, and restless wolves are dangerous." The weight of his words hung in the air as he left, leaving me alone with Kaelin and a growing sense of dread. "Come, child," Kaelin said gently, her voice a contrast to the tension around us. "Your mother's quarters await." I followed her down winding corridors I'd never seen before, the Luna's chair gliding silently behind us. The pack members we passed shrank back against the walls, their eyes flicking nervously toward the chair. Some were filled with awe. Others wore expressions of open hostility. Word had spread. The human girl who dared to sit in the sacred Luna's chair, defying pack hierarchy, was not an unknown figure anymore. The seer's quarters were located in a small tower connected to the pack house. A spiral staircase led up to a heavy wooden door sealed with runes I recognized from my studies. Protection runes meant to ward off both physical and spiritual intrusion. "Only blood can open it now," Kalen said, gesturing to a small depression in the center of the door. Valeria ensured her sanctuary would remain sealed until her return, or yours. I hesitated, pressing my palm to the door's center. A sharp sting shot through my hand as invisible needles pricked my skin, drawing blood. The crimson drops vanished into the wood, and the symbols on the door flared briefly with silver light. Then, with a soft click, the door swung open. The air inside was thick with the scent of dried herbs and old books, remarkably preserved despite decades of abandonment. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through tall windows, casting beams of gold across the room. The circular room was beautiful in its simplicity. A carved wooden bed draped with faded blue coverings, bookshelves lining the curved walls. A writing desk sat perfectly positioned to catch the morning light, and a small sitting area by a stone fireplace. A narrow door led to what appeared to be a private bathing chamber. But the most striking feature was the ceiling, painted with constellations that seemed to shimmer and shift in the changing light. At the center of it all was a silver crescent moon dominating the dome above. "She loved the stars," I whispered, memories flooding back of nights spent with my mother, lying on the roof as she pointed out constellations, teaching me their names and stories. "All seers do," Kalen replied softly. "The heavens speak to those with the gift to listen." I moved to the writing desk, where a quill still rested beside a long, dried inkwell. Next to it lay a leather-bound book, similar to the journal we'd found in the hidden chamber. This one, however, appeared to be more personal, more immediate, like a daily record rather than a legacy document. "I'll leave you to your research," Kalen said, stepping back toward the door. "Someone will bring food shortly. If you need anything, just let me know." "Thank you," I muttered, already distracted by the treasures surrounding me, evidence of the mother I had known but never truly understood. When the door closed behind her, I sank into the chair at the desk, acutely aware of the Luna's chair still hovering beside me. Its presence was a constant reminder of my precarious position. I opened my mother's legacy journal and placed it before me. Then, with a deep breath, I reached for the diary that had waited decades for discovery. Hours passed as I pored over Valeria's world, her daily observations of pack life, her growing concerns about factions forming after the old Alpha's death, and her detailed accounts of visions that had come with increasing frequency and urgency. Her writing was clear, almost too clear, predicting the political shifts within the pack that had come to pass long after her departure. But the most compelling entries were about her decision to flee. March 15th, 1985. The vision came again last night, more vivid than before. Blood on snow, the Alpha crown, shattered wolves turning against their own. And at the center of it all, a pale-haired child with the seer's mark upon her brow. My child, though I have yet to conceive her. I have seen her face so clearly. I have seen her standing between warring factions, her hand joined with another's, as moonlight bathes them both. Rowan grows more volatile as his father weakens. The young wolf has strength and loyalty, but lacks the temperance that leadership demands. If the old Alpha dies now before Rowan finds balance, the factions would destroy each other. And somewhere in that future, my unborn daughter would stand in peril, chosen for a role I cannot yet discern. I must leave before it's too late. Find a life far from pack politics. Perhaps then I can change what I've seen. I leaned back, rubbing my tired eyes as the pieces of the puzzle clicked together. My mother had fled to protect me, a daughter, not yet born from a destiny she feared. And yet, years later she'd returned, knowing the risk, but compelled by a greater vision. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. "Enter," I called, expecting a servant with food. Kira slipped into the room, her young face lighting up with curiosity. and something that looked like hope. She carried a tray stacked high with bread, cheese, and fruit. "I volunteered to bring you dinner," she said, setting the tray on a small table near the fireplace. Her eyes roamed around the room, taking in the painted ceiling and the shelves heavy with ancient texts. "So this is where the seer lived, my mother," I corrected softly, still adjusting to the weight of that truth. Kira's gaze fell on the Luna's chair, still hovering near my desk. "Is it true?" she asked. "Has it really bonded to you?" I nodded awkwardly. "It seems so, though I never intended it." "I think it's wonderful," Kira declared with the enthusiastic simplicity of youth. "The pack's been stuck in the past for too long. We need new blood, new ideas." Her expression darkened just a touch. "Father's been different since Vesper died, focused on strength and tradition to the exclusion of everything else." I studied her carefully. Kira had always been friendly to me, but we'd never really had the chance for a private conversation. "You don't mind that I'm human or mostly human?" I suppose she asked with a shrug of her slender shoulders. "Why would that matter? The chair chose you. The old magic sees things we can't." "Not everyone shares your perspective," I said dryly, my thoughts turning to Caden and Nadia's barely veiled threats. "The older wolves are set in their ways." "I agree," Kira said, sitting on the edge of a chair. "But the younger generation, many of us believe isolation has weakened the pack, not strengthened it." She leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Did you know there are packs in Europe with human members, mates who weren't born wolves, but who are respected nonetheless?" I blinked in surprise. "No, I didn't." "Because our elders don't speak of it," she said, frustration creeping into her voice. "They pretend other ways don't exist, like our traditions are the only ones that matter." Her gaze turned sharp, wiser than her years. "That's why the chair choosing you matters so much. It forces them to confront the possibility of change. Change they might kill to prevent," I pointed out grimly. Kira's expression hardened, suddenly resembling her father. "Anyone who tries will answer to me and others who think like me." The fierce loyalty in her voice caught me off guard. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you, Kira. It means more than you know to have at least one friend in all this," she squeezed back. Then with typical teenage restlessness, she stood. "I should go before Father finds out I'm here. He ordered everyone to leave you in peace for your research." She paused at the door, hesitating. "For what it's worth, I think you'd make a wonderful Luna. You've always been kind, even when others weren't kind to you. The pack needs that more than it knows." With those parting words, she slipped out, leaving me with a storm of emotions. The thought of having allies among the younger wolves was comforting, but the political divide she'd revealed was concerning. If the pack was already split along generational lines, my potential role as Luna might deepen those divisions. I turned back to my mother's journals, urgency growing within me. I needed to find a way to navigate the dangerous waters ahead. The sunset painted the tower room in amber and gold as I opened the journal, flipping through pages until I found what I had been searching for. A series of entries from just before my mother returned to packed territories. April 3rd, 2005. The visions no longer offer choices, only certainties. War is coming to the northern territories. Not this year, perhaps not for many years, but it comes. Humans with new technologies rival packs with old grudges, and caught between them, Rowan's pack isolated and vulnerable because of that isolation. And Zarya, my beautiful daughter, with her father's courage and my sight, though it sleeps within her still. I've seen her standing where I once stood, between factions, between worlds. Where I failed through flight, she must succeed through perseverance. I've seen her beside Rowan, tempering his strength with wisdom as Luna should. I've seen their hands joined beneath a blood moon, while rival alphas bow before a united front. I've seen peace where there might have been extinction. Michael thinks I'm chasing ghosts, risking our lives for a community that rejected me, but he doesn't see what I see. Our daughter's future is bound to the pack's survival, and the pack's survival is necessary for all wolfkind in the coming storms. We leave tomorrow. May the moon forgive me for the burden I place on my child's shoulders. I closed the journal, my hands trembling. My mother had seen me as Luna, not just a seer, but a mate to Rowan. She had returned knowing the risk, believing the sacrifice necessary to ensure I would be in the right place when the pack needed me most. The enormity of her sacrifice threatened to overwhelm me. For 15 years, I'd believed myself an unwanted obligation, tolerated out of duty to a dead woman's request. I finally understood. My presence here had been set into motion by my mother's visions, and it had been bought with her life. I never asked for this, I whispered to the empty room, to the chair that had chosen me, to the mother whose foresight had placed me in this impossible position. No answer came, only the deepening shadows of night settling over the packlands. Soon the moon would rise, and with it the council would reconvene to determine my fate. And perhaps the fate of the pack itself, though they didn't know it yet. I rose from the desk, stretching stiff muscles, and made my way to the tower window. Below, pack members were going about their evening rituals, lighting lanterns, gathering for meals, the children playing in the fading light of day. For 15 years I had lived among them, but always apart, an observer rather than a participant. Now it seemed I stood at a crossroads, one that would decide whether that separation would deepen into a permanent division or transform into something entirely different. The Luna's chair hovered behind me, its silver glow growing stronger as the darkness settled in. Its choice had forced this crisis, making us confront truths that had been buried for far too long. But the true choice, I realized, was still mine to make. When the moon rose, I would face the council with my mother's wisdom in my mind and her courage in my heart. What came after would reshape the pack forever. For better or for worse, we would see. The full moon climbed over the packlands, spilling silver light across the territory, pouring through the tower windows and pooling on the wooden floor. I had changed into a fresh set of clothes, simple but elegant attire that surely belonged to my mother. The deep blue dress fell just below my knees, embroidered with silver thread that caught the moonlight like scattered stars. With my mother's journal tucked under one arm and the Luna's chair silently following me, I moved through the quiet corridors of the pack house toward the council chamber. Pack members stepped aside as I passed, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and curiosity. News traveled fast among wolves. The council was already assembled when I arrived, their faces grim in the flickering firelight. Soren stood at the head of the table, his commanding presence filling the room. He looked up as I entered, his steel-gray eyes briefly flicking over my appearance before returning to the papers before him. "You've had time with your mother's writings," he said, his voice steady. "What have you discovered?" I stepped forward, conscious of the weight of every gaze upon me. My mother didn't flee the pack out of cowardice or disloyalty. I began, my voice stronger than I expected. She left because she foresaw dangerous factions forming after the old Alpha's death, your father's death. My eyes locked with Soren's. She feared civil conflict that would tear the pack apart. Valeria always had a flair for the dramatic, Caden muttered, but Kaelin silenced him with a sharp look. She also foresaw threats gathering beyond our borders. I continued, my voice gaining strength. Humans with new technologies that could detect and track shifters. Rival packs forming alliances against the northern territories. I placed the journal on the table, my hands steady as I laid out my mother's warnings. And most importantly, she saw that the pack's isolation, its refusal to adapt and form alliances, would leave it vulnerable when these threats eventually materialized. "And what does this have to do with the chair claiming you?" Nadia asked, her sharp eyes narrowing, ever the skeptic. I took a deep breath, knowing these words would change everything. My mother believed I would play a crucial role in helping the pack navigate these challenges. She foresaw me standing as both seer and Luna, providing the visions needed to anticipate threats and the influence to guide the pack toward necessary alliances and adaptations. Silence descended, heavy, thick with implication. Soren finally spoke, his voice quiet, dangerous. "You're suggesting that Valeria orchestrated this entire situation?" He met my gaze, his expression unreadable. That she deliberately placed you in our midst, knowing the chair would eventually choose you. Yes, I admitted simply. She believed it was necessary for the pack's survival. Caden slammed his massive fist onto the table, his frustration boiling over. This is absurd. We're supposed to accept a human Luna based on the supposed visions of a woman who abandoned her position decades ago. Not just any human. Kaylin interjected, her voice carrying surprising authority. The last of the Monroe line, a bloodline that has guided this pack since its founding, and not just based on Valeria's visions, but on the chair's choice. She gestured toward the glowing seat still hovering near me. The old magic has spoken. Will you ignore it because it challenges your prejudices? The room erupted in heated debate, voices rising in a cacophony of accusations and counter-arguments. Through it all, Soren remained silent, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin tingle. Finally he spoke, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Enough! The single word laced with alpha authority silenced the room instantly. 15 years ago, Vesper insisted we take in a human child against the advice of many here. Soren's voice was steady, though his gaze never left me. She believed there was purpose in keeping the Monroe bloodline within the pack, though she never fully explained her reasoning. Soren's jaw tightened at the thought. It seems fitting given the circumstances, he muttered. Now it seems both Vesper and Elowen were working toward the same end, positioning you, Zarya, as a bridge between worlds. He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. You've lived among us, but apart, neither pack nor outsider. You've seen our strengths and weaknesses with the objectivity that only someone on the outside could maintain. He paused, perhaps struggling with the admission. Maybe that perspective is exactly what we need in the times ahead. A spark of hope ignited within me. Maybe, just maybe, this was a chance to bridge the divide that had separated me from them for so long. But Caden wasn't so easily swayed. Even if we accept her heritage, he growled, his tone thick with disdain. Even if we believe these so-called prophecies, the Luna must be the Alpha's mate. Are you suggesting that we take this human to fulfill that role, that we dishonor Vesper's memory so easily? A dangerous stillness settled over Soren's massive frame. Be very careful, old friend, he said quietly, his voice low and cold. Your years of service grant you certain liberties, but there are lines even you should not cross. The tension between the two wolves crackled like an electrical storm. I stepped forward, unwilling to let things escalate because of me. I have no desire to replace anyone's memory, I said firmly, nor to force a bond where none exists. If my mother's visions are accurate, if the threats she foresaw are indeed gathering, then the pack needs both a seer's guidance and unity of purpose to survive what's coming. I turned to face Soren directly. I propose a compromise. I accept the role the chair has offered. Not as Luna in the traditional sense, but as seer and advisor. I hesitated, the heat of my cheeks rising. Without the mate bond that typically accompanies the Luna position. Kaylin frowned slightly. The chair doesn't typically allow for half-measures, child. Perhaps not typically. I acknowledged, my voice unwavering, but these are not typical circumstances. I placed my hand on the arm of the Luna's chair, still hovering near me. This chair recognized something in me that transcends traditional boundaries. Maybe it's time our understanding evolved as well. A heavy silence fell over the council chamber, my words lingering in the air. No one spoke for what felt like an eternity. Each person lost in their own thoughts, calculating the political ramifications. Then unexpectedly, Nessa's voice rang out from the doorway where she stood with several younger pack members. I support Zarya's proposal, she declared, stepping into the chamber uninvited. The younger generation stands with her. This is a council meeting, Nadia hissed. You have no place here. We have every place here, Nessa countered boldly. Her young face set with determination that echoed her father's. This decision affects our future more than yours. The old ways have kept us isolated and vulnerable. Zarya offers a bridge to new possibilities, new alliances. Murmurs of agreement swept through the younger wolves who had followed Nessa. I recognized faces I'd seen over the years, wolves who'd occasionally sought information in the archives or nodded at me with quiet respect. Soren studied his daughter with a look I couldn't read. "You organized this demonstration?" he asked, his voice a mixture of pride and concern. Nessa lifted her chin defiantly. "Someone had to speak for those whose voices aren't heard in this chamber." For a moment I feared Soren's anger. Challenging an alpha publicly was dangerous even for his own daughter. But to my surprise, a small smile touched the corner of his lips. "You have your mother's courage," he said softly, his voice quieter now. He turned back to the council table, his decision made. "Zarya Morn will assume the position of Pack Seer with all rights and responsibilities thereof," he declared. "She will have a voice in council matters equal to any member seated here." "And the chair?" Caden demanded, his frustration evident. "It chose her as Luna, not merely Seer." Soren's gaze met mine across the room, something unspoken passing between us. "The Luna's position remains as tradition dictates the Alpha's mate. But traditions evolve, as my daughter so boldly reminds us," he added, his voice growing more formal. "If in time bonds form that honor both tradition and necessity, the Pack will address that possibility then." It was a diplomatic solution, acknowledging the chair's choice without forcing immediate action, creating space for the future to unfold naturally rather than by decree. I nodded in agreement, relief flooding through me. I would not be immediately thrust into a mate bond with someone I barely knew, no matter how compelling his presence was. "Until such time," Soren continued, "Zarya will occupy the Seer's quarters and be accorded the respect due her bloodline and position." His gaze swept the room, landing particularly hard on Caden and Nadia. "Any who cannot abide by this decision are free to challenge it according to Pack law or to seek territory elsewhere." The tension in the room simmered, but the decision had been made. The path forward, uncertain as it was, had been set. The threat was undeniable, and not even Caden seemed willing to push further against the Alpha's decree. One by one, the council members lowered their heads, showing reluctant compliance, though not wholehearted agreement. Kaylin was the first to approach me, her ancient eyes shimmering with the weight of unspoken emotion. "Your mother would be proud," she whispered, clasping my hands with her weathered ones. "The Monroe line returns to its rightful place." One by one, others came forward, some with genuine warmth, others with stiff, reluctant formality. Nessa bounded over, her youthful energy filling the room, throwing her arms around me in a hug that caught me by surprise. "I knew the chair wasn't wrong," she said fiercely, her voice brimming with determination. "We're going to change everything." As the gathering began to disperse, I found myself alone with Soren in the council chamber. The Luna's chair still hovered near me, its glow softer now, almost as though it was content with the outcome. "Thank you," I said quietly, my voice thick with gratitude, "for finding a way forward that respects both tradition and necessity." Soren studied me, his steel gray eyes piercing through me. "Your mother was right about one thing," he said after a long pause. "Change is coming whether we embrace it or fight it. Better to shape it than be crushed by it." I glanced at the glowing chair still suspended nearby. "And the chair?" I asked a question that had been at the back of my mind since the moment I sat in it. He gave a ghost of a smile, a fleeting softness in his expression. "The chair sees what we cannot, not just what is, but what might be. Perhaps it's wiser than all of us." He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his powerful frame. "The Pack needs its seer, Zarya Morn," he said, his voice softer now, though the weight of his words carried. "And he hesitated, something vulnerable flashing across his face. "I find myself curious to know the woman who has lived among us all these years, observing much but revealing little." I met his gaze. "I'm not sure you'll like what you discover," I said honestly. "I've spent too long on the outside to fit easily into the pack's hierarchy." "Good," he replied, surprising me. "We've had enough of easy certainties. Perhaps what we need now," he continued, "is someone who questions, who challenges, who sees with both the outsider's objectivity and the insider's loyalty." He extended his hand, not the formal grasp of an alpha to a subordinate, but palm up an invitation. "Shall we discover what your mother foresaw? Not because fate demands it, but because we choose it." I hesitated for only a moment before placing my hand in his. The contact sent a wave of warmth through me, like something dormant inside me, waking up, recognizing an essential truth. "One step at a time," I agreed, my voice steady. "The future remains unwritten despite what the vision suggests." Together we stood in the moonlight, streaming through the high windows. The Luna's chair glowed softly, almost approvingly, and somewhere, perhaps only in my mind, I felt my mother's presence, a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the path she had sacrificed everything for was finally unfolding before me, not as the outsider I had once been, not entirely as the Luna the chair had chosen, but as something new, a bridge between worlds, between traditions, between what had been and what might yet be. The journey ahead would not be easy. Change never is. But for the first time since I sat in that fateful chair, I felt something like hope for the future, both mine and the pack's.